2025 Math Paper 2, Grade 9, External Candidate. So let's see how fast we can look at this paper. So the first question was simplify 2 open brackets 3a minus b minus 5a. So the first step according to board mass is you deal with the brackets. So you can say 2 multiplied by 3, this will be 6a. 2 multiplied by minus b, you have minus 2b, and then minus 5. I'm not going to multiply this 2 by 5 because it has nothing to do with the brackets. And then now we can put the like terms together. So we have an a here and we have an a here. So you can say 6a, this is a positive number. Then we have negative 5a, this is a negative number, so I'll put it here. And then you have minus 2b, and then since these two are like terms, we can subtract them to get a minus 2b. And you're done with this. On part B, you have this: express 56,982 in standard form, correct to 2 significant figures. So the first thing you want to do is to express this in standard form. So you can say this is like 56,982. So if the decimal point is not appearing, just know that it is at the far end there. So move it as many steps as it will take for you to have only one digit in front. So that digit in this case will be a 5, since 5 is the first non-zero digit here. So you can say I'll move it 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be 5.6982 multiplied by 10 raised to the power the number of steps taken, 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. So this would be 4. And because we were moving towards bigger numbers, it would be a positive. If I was moving towards these decimal numbers this side, it would be a negative number. But then the second part is saying correct to 2 significant figures. So I have to make sure that I only have 2 digits here. How do I do that? I'll write this one, and then before I write the last digit, I'll check the digit which comes before this digit. So since we have a 9 which is above 4, so if you have a number like 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9, then this should increase by 1 so that you have 5.7. But do not forget this multiplied by 10 to the power 4. And you're done. If you had a number less than 5, like 4, 3, 2, 1, or even 0, then you leave this as it is. And then on question C, given a triangle with sides of length A, B, and C, so we have this triangle with sides A, B, and C. Complete the flowchart for calculating and displaying the perimeter of the triangle. So perimeter is simply the total distance around the given shape. So for me to find the total distance around this shape, I can just say A, I'll add this, and then I'll add that. So this is my perimeter. So now on the part of the input, we can say, look at this word here. Whatever you've been given is your input. It should be here. So given a triangle with sides, so we've been given A, B, and C. So in this box, which is the input box, we can say enter A, B, C. You separate them with commas. And then complete the flowchart for calculating and displaying the perimeter of the triangle. So in this box, we are processing So make sure that you use the letters you've been given. So you've been given the sides A, B, and C in small letters, and then you've been given the perimeter P in capital as a capital letter. So you can say P will be, this is what the system will process. So P will be, remember, this thing should find the perimeter around this triangle. So it should be A plus B plus C. Like we said, perimeter is simply the total distance around the given shape. And then on the part of the output, you check. So at the end we have this statement and displaying the perimeter of the triangle. So the whole point of this thing is to display the perimeter of the given figure, the given, yes, the given shape. So we can say here we can just say display P like that, and they're done. And then on part D, a machine is valued at 4,700 exclusive of value added tax, which is VAT. Given that VAT is charged at 16%, calculate the cost of the machine inclusive of VAT. So since VAT has not been included here, we can start by finding the VAT and then add it to this, or we can use proportions to find the answer directly. So I'll use both methods. Let's start by finding 16% of this, which is the VAT. So we have 4,700. We want to find 16% of this number, which will be the VAT. So this is our VAT. So to make it easier, I can do this. And then now I have 47, which is being multiplied by 16. So 47 by 16, this times this, we have a 42. This times this, we have a 24, plus 4, we have 28. And then 7 plus this, 7 by 1, we have a 7. Of course, we have a placeholder. 1 by 4, we have a 4. And then now we can add this plus this, we have a 2. 8 plus 7, that's a 15. So you write 5 carry 1. This is a 6 plus that, we have a 7. So this was the amount of money they paid for VAT. But then they didn't just pay this amount, they also paid this. So this is the cost of the machine if this has not been included. So when this one has been included, then what you have is, so let me just indicate that here. So price, or maybe cost, will therefore be this plus that. 4700 plus 752. So I can just say 2 plus 0, we have a 2. 5 plus 0, we have a 5. And then 7 plus 7, we have 14. And then this one plus that, we have this. So this is one method you can use. An alternative method is to use proportions, where you say this amount is proportional to 100%, because this is like the pure amount. Nothing has been added and nothing has been subtracted, so you can treat it as 100%. And then after a 16% was added, you have the new cost, which you can just call x. And then now let's solve for x. So we can say this multiplied by this and this multiplied by that. So I have 100x, and then this multiplied by that. So I think in this case, this method is kind of complicated, but let's make it easier. Before we multiply, let's just divide both sides by 100. So that x is, you cancel out these two zeros, and then you have 47 multiplied by 116. So let's multiply 116 by 47. So this times this is 42, and then that's a 7 plus 4, we have an 11. Then that's a 7 plus 1, we have an 8. This is 24, so we can put the placeholder and carry a 2. And then 4 by 1, that's a 4 plus 2, we have a 6. 4 by 1, we have a 4. Then this would be 2, this would be 5, this would be 4, and this would be 5. So this is an alternative method. This works best when you have something like inclusive of but in a case like this, it's better to use this. And then we move on to question 2. So a bag contains 6 blue and 2 green buttons of the same size. If one button is picked at random from the bag, what is the probability that the button is green? So probability that the button is green, you can write it like this, is given by, you count the number of buttons in that bag. So we have 6 blue ones and 2 green ones. So in total we have 6 plus 2, which is 8. So we have 8 buttons in total. And then now on the numerator, you put the number of green buttons. So as you can see, we have 2 green ones. So you can say 2 over 8. And then on your step 2, of course in mathematics you can't give your answer like this unless you want to sacrifice a mark or 2. So you will reduce this number to its lowest form. So you can just use the highest common factor of these two, which is a 2. So 2 into 2, you have a 1. 2 into 8, you have a 4, and you're done. And then next, find the product of 321 in base 5 and 14 in base 5, giving your answer in base 5. So we have 3, 2, 1 being multiplied by 14. So we have a lot of methods here, but the best method is the grade 3 method, where you multiply like this. But of course, you have to bear in mind that in base 5, you only have numbers less than 5. Of course, I'm talking about positive numbers, unless you're dealing with negative numbers. So these are the only numbers you expect, or the only digits you expect in base 5. So anything outside this has to be divided by 5, and then you can get the remainder. So let's proceed. So you can say 4 multiplied by 1, this is a 4. And then 4 multiplied by 2, we have an 8. As you can see, we don't have an 8. By the way, I wrote the 4 because we have a 4. But we don't have an 8 in base 5. So you can say 8. You divide it by 5. Then you can say 5 into 8. That's 1. Remainder 3. So you write down the remainder like this, and then you can carry this one over to the next digit like this. And then you can say 4 multiplied by 3, that's a 12, plus 1, we have a 13. We do not have a 13 in base 5, so you can say 13 divided by 5, so this will be 2 remainder 3. So you write down the remainder, and then you carry the 2 over to the next digit. But because we don't have any digit here, you can just write your 2 here like this. So you even get a mark for doing this. And then next, you multiply by 1, which is far much easier. And of course, you still get the 1 mark for multiplying this, even if everything else is wrong. So you can say 1 multiplied by 1, that's a 1. 1 multiplied by 2, you have a 2. 1 multiplied by 3, you have a 3. So 1 mark for this, 1 mark for this, and then 1 more mark for the final answer. So now let's add them. This plus this, we have a 4. 4 is in base 5, so you can write it down. 3 plus 1, you have another 4. Because we have a 4 in base 5, you can write it down. 3 plus 2, we have a 5. Unfortunately, we don't have a 5 in base 5. So you can divide that 5 by 5. So 5 into 5, this is a 1, remainder 0. So you write the 0 down and then carry this one over to the next digit, which is this. Then you can say 2 plus 3, that's a 5, plus 1, you have a 6. We do not have a 6 in base 5, so we divide it by 5. So 5 into 6, that's a 1, remainder 1. So you can write this one down, and then you can carry this one over to the next digit, like that. But because we have nothing here, you can just write it there. And this is your answer. Then you can just indicate the base like that. Then, so I solved this one separately because I didn't want to make this video too long. You can just check it out. So I'll skip it and proceed to question 3. So these are optional questions. You choose any 3 questions from this section. So passing mathematics is also about strategy. The nature of the questions you choose will equally matter. So find the value of 101101 divided by 10012, giving your answer in base 2. So this one is easy, especially if you're using long division. Well, it's also possible you can convert these numbers to base 10, you divide, and then you convert them back to base 2. But that's a lot of work, and in most cases, students who tend to use that method will normally forget to convert the number back to base 10. So let's use long division, which is the easiest and the most direct method. So we have 100 being divided by. So the order of operations here is divisions. One of my students shared this memory aid with me, which is dead. Sorry, this is supposed to be subtraction. So she said dead monkeys smell bad. So she normally uses this to remind, or maybe to remember this order of operations. So the first operation is division. You can start by dividing 1001 into 1. Because this is not possible, you can involve the next digit. Remember, in base 2 you only have zeros and 1. If division is not possible, you have a 0. So this is like a no. If division is possible, you have a 1. So 1001 into 1, that's a 0 because it's not possible. In 200, it's a 0 because it's not possible. By it's not possible, I mean you are getting decimals. And then this into 100, I mean 101, still not possible because this is still bigger than this. And then into this will be a 1. Remember, if it can go into this number, then your answer is 1. And then after division, we have multiplication. So you multiply 1 by 101. So I'll write the number starting from this side, just below the last digit I divided by. So I have a 1, a 0, and another 1. And then I can subtract. Remember, after multiplication, you have subtraction. So you have the 0, 1 minus 0, that's a 1. then 0 minus 0, you have a 0, you have a 0. So you may not need to write the zeros this side unless you just want to. And then after this, you can bring this digit down. They call this bring down. So you have a 0. By they, I mean my students. So you can say 1001 in 200. Remember, if it's not possible, you have a 0. If it's possible, you have a yes. So 1001 has more digits than this. In other words, this is bigger than this. So it's not possible. You have a 0. And then after that, you multiply. Remember, after division, you have multiplication. I have just restarted the process. So 0 multiplied by this, I'll get a 0 like this. If you want, you can even put 3 zeros, but one should suffice. And then after this, we can subtract. Remember, after multiplication, we have subtraction. So you have 1, 0, 0. And then after subtraction, you can bring this digit down like this. And then 1001 into 1001, you have a 1. And then 1 multiplied by 1001, that's a 1001. And then after this, you can subtract. After multiplication, you can subtract. And then as you can see, this is 0, this is 0, this is 0, this is 0. And because you do not have any other number to bring down, it means you are done. So we can proceed to part B. Calculate the sum of interior angles of a polygon with 12 sides. So to find the number of interior angles, you basically have two methods. You may even have more. So in this one, I think I'll just use the easiest method. So the easiest method is to find an exterior angle first. Remember, an exterior angle is given by 360 divided by the number of sides. So you can say exterior will be 360 divided by 12. So your exterior angle will be 12 into 36, that's a 3. 12 into 0, that's a 30. So the exterior angle for this polygon is 30, or the interior angles are all 30s. So now to find the interior angles, you need to take advantage of the fact that the exterior angle and the interior angle are complementary angles. They are supplementary angles. These guys are on the same straight line. So when I add this to this, I should get 180 degrees. So to find this angle here, which is the interior angle, I can just say interior angle is equal to 180 minus 30. Or you can just write down the equation and then solve it. So you have interior angle is equal to this minus this, you have 150 degrees. So this is, oh no, I was answering a wrong question. So this is the interior angle. The question is asking you to find the sum of interior angles. So you can ignore this. So the sum of interior angles is given by the number of sides minus 2 multiplied by 180. So the number of sides, we have 12 minus 2 multiplied by 180. So how many sides? That's 12 minus 2, which is a 10, multiplied by 180. Then when you multiply these two numbers, you have 1800. So if you decided to use this, you can as well just multiply this by 12 and you'll get the same answer. Since you have 12 interior angles, and then when you add all the 12 interior angles, you get this. But this is the best method for a problem like this. And then on question 3c, we've been given a minus bc is equal to 3 plus 7c, and then make c the subject of the formula. So to make c the subject of the formula, the first thing you want to do is to take all the c terms to one side and then everything else to the other side. So to minimize negative signs, I'll take my BC to the other side as opposed to bringing this one this side. Of course, it won't be wrong except that you have a lot of negative signs. So the two answers may look a bit different, but they are both correct. So I'll leave my A here, then I'll bring my 3 this side so that I have negative 3. And then I'll leave my 7C this side, and then I'll take my BC to the other side. So remember, the idea is to put all the terms with C's on one side and then everything else on the other side. So now at this point, we can factor out the C. So once you factor the C out, you have a 7 plus B like this. And then to make C the subject of the formula, you need to get rid of this thing here, 7 plus B. So now, to get rid of this, I can just divide both sides by the same thing. 7 plus B. So this and that will go. And then we have a C, we have A minus 3 over 7 plus B. And you're done. But of course, it's better to leave your final answer in this form. You put your C on your left hand side and say C is equal to A minus 3 over 7 plus B, like this. And then we can proceed to part D. So on part D, we have a triangular prism. And then they want us to calculate the volume of the prism. So to find the volume of a triangular prism, the formula is base area times height. And remember that the height is the distance from between the two triangles. From one triangle to the other, that's the height. So you can say base area, which is the area of the triangular face, it's given by half BH times height. This one, the height of the triangle. So you can even use half LBH. It's still okay. So now your volume will be half, and then your L and B must be perpendicular to each other. So in this case, it was even easier because we didn't have any numbers there. So now, to find the base area of this, you can just multiply the two perpendicular sides. And how do you know which two sides are perpendicular? You look for this small square. So the small square is telling you that this line is perpendicular to this. So I'll multiply these two. I can say 4 multiplied by 10 and then multiplied by the height of the triangular prism, which is 15. Of course, I'll make my work easier by reducing my numbers. So now 2 times 10, I have a 20 minus multiplied by 15, and then when I multiply this by this, I'll get 2 times 3 is 30, and then you include this 0. Of course, the units for volume when you have centimeters is cubic centimeters, like this. So this is your final answer for question 4D. And then we move on to question, this is question 3D. We move on to question 5, where we have a pair of simultaneous equations. So solve the simultaneous equations. So to solve these equations simultaneously, we can simply add. Since the coefficients of y are the same, of course you need to check the coefficients of x and the coefficients of y. Since the coefficients of y are the same and the signs are different, you can just go ahead and add so that the y is eliminated. So x plus 3x, this will be 4x, negative 2y plus 2y, negative 2y plus 2y. Remember, when you have different signs, you subtract. So this will just be a 0. You may not even write it down. And then 7 plus 5, you have a 12. And then to solve for x, you can just divide both sides by 4. So that your x is 3. And you're done. Oh no, you are not. You still have to solve for y. So once you solve for x, you have to solve for y now. So to solve for y, you can just pick any of the two equations. For me, I think the second equation will be much easier because it has less negative numbers, despite the fact that it has more coefficients. Anyway, the choice is always yours. Just pick whatever is easy for you. So for me, the second one is easier. So where there is x, I'll put my x, I mean your x, and then 2y is equal to 5. And then now we can expand this times this, we have a 9 plus 2y is equal to 5. And then now to solve for y, I can just take this one to the other side so that I have a 2y here, a 5, and then a minus 9. Remember, it was positive here, so it should be negative this side. And then we have 2y is equal to minus 4. And then to solve for y, you can simply divide both sides by 2 so that your y is minus 2. So your x is 3 and y is minus 2. So we are done here. And then on part B, Mary is paid a monthly basic salary of 8,000. Calculates her monthly gross salary if she also receives 20% of the basic salary as housing allowance. So in other words, Mary receives this, and then the word also implies that she receives both this and 20% of this. So you can start by maybe coming up with something that will guide you to solve, something like a formula. So we can say her basic salary, calculate her, okay, you can just say her monthly gross salary is basic plus the 20% of, maybe you can just say plus allowance, housing allowance, like this. So now, since we know this, we can just find this one. So to find this, you know that this is 20% of this. So 20% means 20 over 100 of 8,000. So you can reduce the number of zeros. I think let's do it like this, and then this one with that, and then 2 times 0, you have 0, 2 times 0, you have 0, 2 times 8, you have 16. And then now her total salary will therefore be this 8,000 plus the commission, which is 1,600. So this plus this will be a 0, 0, 6, and 9. So this is Mary's monthly gross salary. And then next we have question 5c. Are we supposed to be on question 5? Okay, I think we have a missing page. Okay, a page is missing. Let me just use an actual paper. Okay, I swapped the pages. This is where question 4c is. So the Venn diagram, study the Venn diagram and answer the questions that follow. So list the elements in set P union Q complement intersection R. So to list these elements, I can start with these things here. I can start by listing elements in P union Q complement. So by P union Q complement, I mean elements which are outside P and Q. This is my Q, by the way. So P union Q means this and this combined. And then P union Q complement means outside these two. So by outside P and Q, we mean these three guys here. So you list them down in ascending order. So I think the first one will be a G, and then an I, and then we have a J, like this. These are my elements in P union Q. And then elements of R, so you go to R, this is your R. You list down the elements of R in ascending order. Of course, the order does not matter, but it's much easier for the marker to mark when everything is in order. And you may even lose some marks if anyway, let me not talk about that. So R, you have A, and then followed by D, and then E, and then F, and then we have a G, and then an I. Yeah, so now to state or to list down elements in P union Q complement intersection R, you can just find the elements which are common to these two sets. Remember the intersection of this and this, elements which are in this set and this set, and this set is this, this is this. So let's check. We have a G in both sets, and then we have an I in both sets. So yeah, you have G and I. We don't have a J in here, and then we don't have any of the other elements in set R. So this will be your answer. And then lastly, we have this part. So we have P intersection Q. So we have no complement there. So in this case, you can just say the elements of P intersection Q are P intersection Q. So we're talking about these elements here in the intersection of P and Q. Forget about these other intersections. So this is an A, and then we have a C, and then we have an E. Yeah, that is if I have not modified this. Anyway, assuming it's okay. And then N intersection R. So for Q intersection R, for Q intersection R, we are talking about this intersection here, the meeting point of Q and R, or elements which are found in both Q and Q and R. So Q and R, yes, these two here. So those elements are A, E, and F. So we can say A, E, F. And then now we want to get the union of P intersection Q and Q intersection R. By the union, we mean you put them together without repeating any element. So we can start with an A, followed by a C, followed by an E. I'm not going to write two E's, one is enough, and then I have an F. So this will be my answer for question 4, part C. So let's go back to question 5. So my question 5 is here. The order is not correct. So in the diagram, AD is a straight line. Angle BAC is 2x, and then angle ABC is 3x, and angle BCD is 130. express the sum of interior angles in triangle ABC in terms of x in its simplest form. So this is tempting. I've noticed a lot of students solving for x here, which is not the question is asking you to do. The question is asking you to express the sum of interior angles. So by interior angles, we're talking about this angle, and this angle. Of course, we can find this because this is a straight line. You've been told that AD is a straight line, AD is a straight line. So that means this is 180 degrees. So to find this angle, I can simply say 180 minus 130. So this will give me a 50. So this angle is a 50. So now I have all the interior angles. The next thing I want to do is to find the sum of interior angles. Do I need to solve for x? No, because the question is saying in terms of x in its simplest form. So you can say this plus that. So we have 2x plus 3x plus 50. Am I done? No. The last part is saying in its simplest form. So this is not the simplest form I can give my answer in. So I have to add these two because these are like terms. So this plus this will be 5x plus 50. And now I'm done. So that's easy. And then on part B, we have a matrix. I don't know why they decided to give it 2 marks this time. It's normally 3 marks. So given that R is this and S is this, express SR as a single matrix. So to find SR as a single matrix, start with S. So it's tempting to get R and then multiply it by S, but that's not what they want. They said SR. So that means you're starting with your S. This is your S. Remember, SR is not the same as RS in matrices. So you have to stick to the order you've been told to use. So your S is this, which is 5, and then minus 2, and then minus 7, and then 3. And then your R is 3, 2, 7, 5. And since there is no sign in between, it means you are multiplying these two. So now let's multiply. Remember, multiplication here is row by column, like this. So you can say 5 multiplied by 3, like this row by this column. 5 multiplied by 3, this is 15. Then minus 2 multiplied by 7, you have minus 14. So when you multiply this by this, you have to add, but because this is negative, you subtract, and then you have some space here. Remember, you are multiplying a 2 by 2 matrix by a 2 by 2 matrix, so you're expecting another 2 by 2 matrix. So you can do the same thing with this same row with and that column. So you can say 5 multiplied by 2, this is a 10, and then minus 2 multiplied by 5, this is minus 10. And then you say row by column again to get these numbers at the bottom. So I'll use this row to multiply, to get these numbers. So to do that, I can just say minus 7 multiplied by 3, this will be negative 21. And then we have the 3 multiplied by 7, this will be positive 21. And then we can do the same thing to get these numbers, except that I'll use this and that. So I can say minus 7 by 2, we have minus 14. Then 3 by 5, we have plus 15. So now we can simplify this. This minus this, that's a 1, that's a 0, that's a 0, that's a 1, and you're done. And then on 5C, this is where my 5C is. So on the x or y plane, illustrate the solution of y is greater than or equal to 3 minus x by shading the wanted region for the domain minus 3 to 4. So to sketch this, I can make a simple table like this, and then this will be x, this is y. I need at least three boxes. 2 boxes should be enough, but we normally add the third one just for confirmation. So now I can pick any of these x values and put them there, and then I can use them together with this in equation to get the corresponding y values. So because I want to make my work easier, I'll pick a 0, and then I'll also pick a 1, and then I'll also pick, let's say, a 4. Usually you want to make them spaced so that it's much easier to sketch. Yeah, let me also use a -1. Yeah, like that. A 0 may be a bit challenging to sketch if you are not very familiar with this topic. So now, to find the corresponding y value when x is this, I'll use this one as an equation. So it's an inequation here, but I've converted it to an equation so that I can find the corresponding y value when x is -1. So this will be x minus, my x is -1, so I'll do this. So this times this will be positive. So that means y will be a 4. So that's a 4. And then to find this one, we can use the same in equation 3. So where there was x, I'll put my 1 like this. But do not forget this negative sign. So 3 minus 1, that's a 2. And then I'll do the same thing here. Y is equal to 3. Where there was a 4, where there was an x, I'll put a 4, and then of course we have a minus there. So in this case we have a -1 like this. So now you can plot these 3 points and connect them with a straight line. So let's start with -1, 4. So -1, 4, somewhere there. Then we have 1, 2. Remember, these are your x's and then these are your y's. So 1 in the x-axis, 2 in the y-axis, like this. And then lastly we have 4, -1. So this is 4, -1. My -1 is there. So another one could have picked different digits. If, for example, you had picked a 0, you'd get a 3, so your point would be there. If you had also picked a 2, you'd get a 1, and your point would be there. If you had picked a 3, you'd have 3, 0, which is here. So whichever point you pick will still be okay. So now you can use your ruler to draw a straight line. Of course, you're not using your pen. I'm only doing it because this is a video, and if I use a pen, so it may not be very clear with this lighting. So now the line has to be solid here because we have greater than or equal to. If it was strictly greater than or strictly less than, then we can ignore we can make the line broken. And then now I have to shade the wanted region. So how do I know which one is the wanted region? So I'll get this equation, y is greater than or equal to 3 minus x. And then I can pick any point out away from the line. It could be this side or this side, and then I'll test it in the given in equation. So because I want to make my work easier, I'll pick 1, 1 because it's not on the line and it's easy to use. So I'll put a 1 there and there. So I have 1 is greater than or equal to 2. So now let's look at this. Does it make sense? No, because 1 cannot be greater than 2. This is not correct. So that means this is not the wanted region. So if this is not the wanted region, then the wanted region should be on the other side. So I'm going to shade this other region. So now in mathematics, you don't have to be artistic. You don't need to make any funny drawings like that. Just make some simple lines like this, and everyone will know that you have shaded this region. And then if you want to verify that this is indeed the wanted region, you can as well pick any of these points this side. Maybe 4,3, which is this, or 4,1, or 3,1, 3,2, 2,2, or any of the points this side, and you'll get the true mathematical statement. So we have this one here. So in the diagram, AD and AC are straight lines, BE is parallel to CD, AE is 12 centimeters, BC is 4 centimeters, DE is equal to 3 centimeters, and angle CAD is 90 degrees. Calculate the length of AB. So the best way to solve problems like these is to separate the two triangles first. So I'll get the smaller triangle and put it here, and then I'll get the bigger triangle. By the smaller triangle, I mean this one, which is EAB. And then I'll get the bigger triangle, which is this. So DAC, like this. And then now I can put the dimensions. For the shorter triangle, this is 12, and then this part here is unknown, the AB. This is what you want to find. So you can either call it AB or you can call it X. So I'll call it X, and then I'll explain why. Yes, I'll explain why. So your AD will be the distance from A to D. So remember that from here to there you have 12 centimeters, and from here to there you have 3 centimeters. So the distance from A to D will therefore be the sum of these two, which is 15. So that's your AD. And then the distance from A to C will be the distance from A to B, which we called X, and the distance from B to C. So this one will be X plus 4. And then now to solve for X, or to find the distance AB, you can either use proportions or ratios or fractions. So for me, I'll just go with proportions. I'll just relate the sides because for me, that's much easier. So you can say this side looks like this, right? So in other words, this is related to that. So 12 is related to 15. And then this is related to that. As you can see, this looks like that. It's like this is the smaller version of this. So you can say X is proportional to X plus 4. So if you're using fractions, you may write something like 12 over 15 is equal to X over X plus 4. It's the same thing. So now you can cross multiply and say 12 times this. So I'll say 12x plus 4, and this times this, which will be 15x. Then now we can expand. This will be 12x. We should have started with this, it would have been easier, but anyway, it's still okay. So this times this will be 48. Then we have 15x. So to solve for x, instead of taking the 48 this side and bringing the 5 this side, I'll just take the 12x to the other side so that I minimize negative signs as much as possible, and I reduce on moving numbers unnecessarily. So now we can say 15x minus 12, this will be 3x. And then to solve for x, you can simply divide both sides by 3, so that your x is this into that, that's a 1, remainder 1, this into that, you have a 16. So you can conclude this side and say therefore my AB is equal to 16 centimeters, since we are dealing with centimeters. So now we can move on to question 6. We're almost there. So remember, the questions you choose, okay, here is question 6. The questions you choose are important because the easier the questions you choose, the more likely you are to go above 90%. So Vincent wants to buy a truck valued at 380,000 kwacha. How much will he pay in American dollar if the exchange rate is $1 to 19 kwacha? So you can say $1, to 19 kwacha like this. I'll ignore the zeros at the end, the decimal point, this part there, because these numbers here, because they are just zeros and they are after a decimal point, despite the fact that they are significant. And then I want to convert this, so I'll put this on the side where we have kwacha. So we have kwacha here, so I can put it here, 380,000, and then I can put an x there. And then to solve for x, I can just cross multiply. So maybe for now I can ignore these, although they normally just cancel out like that, and then you multiply this by that, then you have dollars. So this times this will be 19x, then 1 times 380, you have 380,000. Then to solve for x, you can simply divide both sides by 19. Then 19 into 38, I think this was easy, that's a 2. And then you have these 3 zeros, so you put this 0 and the other 3 zeros. Of course, this is in dollar, so you can indicate. And then on part B, the table shows the number of pairs of shoes produced by a factory in 4 weeks. So number of pairs of shoes, we have this, and then number of weeks, we have this. Use the information in the table to complete the bar chart. So the last one has been done for you. So we have numbers at the bottom, which are week numbers. So we have week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and then the number of shoes produced. So this means in week 4, they produced 100 shoes. In week 3, we are told they produced 70 shoes. So this is where your 70 is. You will use your pencil to shade this thing all the way to 70. Remember, they produced 70 shoes in week 3. And then in week 2, they produced 90 shoes. So this is where my 90 is in week 2. So I will do this. Of course, you are using a pencil, and then I will shade like so. Just make sure that you make it neat. And then in week 1, they only produced 50 shoes. This is my 50. So I will shade this region like this, and then I'm done. It's this easy. So you have 3 marks for free. And then the next part C of question 6 is here. So the XOY plane, on the XOY plane, plot the points V, which is minus 2, 3. So minus 2 on the x-axis, 3 on the y-axis. So we have this one here. You can put your V. And then we have negative 2, negative 3. So negative 2, negative 3, this one. Of course, this part has a name. And then lastly, we have this point, which is 1, negative 3. So 1, 1 on the x-axis, and then negative 3 there, like this. This is x. So if they don't ask you to connect the points, then you don't have to connect them. Oh yeah, this is capital letter X. It's not one of these. Yeah. And then draw the graph of y is equal to 2x. So you have an option. You can either use dots or you can use crosses, but not both. So now draw the graph of y is equal to 2x. So this is easy. You can just make a table like this, then say y is equal to 2x. So you can just pick x values from here. So for me, I'll pick a 0. It's much easier to use. I'll also pick a 2. And then let's say I also pick a 1. Okay, let me use a 3. So now for me to find the corresponding y value, I just need to multiply each of these numbers by 2, like this. So 2, where there is x, I put a 0, that would be a 0. And then where there is x, if I put a 2, that would be a 4. So I'll put my 4 there. And then where there is x, if I put my 3, I'll have my 6. So I have my 6 there. So we have 0, 0 here. And then we have 2, 4 here, which is this point there. Maybe let me use dots to differentiate them from these. And then we also have 3, 6. 3, 6. Okay, so we don't have a 6 here. This is unusual. So maybe instead of using a 6, a 3 rather, we can just use a 1 or a negative 1 or a negative 2. So I think I'll just use a negative 2 here. So y is equal to 2, negative 2. So this will be negative 4. So we have negative 2, negative 4. Okay, we already have a point there. So now my next task will be to draw a straight line passing through each of these points, like so. Okay, 2, 4. Let me just check my points. Negative 2, 4, and then 0, 0, and then negative 2, and then 2, 4. 2, 4. Okay, my points are okay. So you can connect them with a straight line, like this. I think this thing was not printed out correctly. Otherwise, these points should connect. Oh, I've seen my mistake. And negative 2, negative 4 is here. Not this one. Yeah. So now we can connect these 3 points like so. And of course, don't forget to name your equation or your line, which is y is equal to 2x. And then we'll move on to question 7. So on question 7, we have a salesman. So a salesman is paid a fixed salary of 3,200 and receives 2% commission on all the sales. If he earns 4,550 in a month, calculate the total amount of sales that he made. So you can just use a formula here. So the formula is, we have the fixed salary plus 2% commission, and then is equal to the total amount. And so total amount like this. So now you know what this is. You've been given this is 3,200, and then you also know that 2% means 2 over 100. Okay, my pen died. So 2 over 100 multiplied by the commission. But then you don't know what the commission is, because you know that the commission is 2% of the what's this, if he earned the fixed salary. So it's 2% of the total sales, not really the amount of money paid. I think this question was a bit tricky. So it said 2% of the total sales. So if he earned this much in a month, calculate the total amount of sales. Yes, so this is 2% of total sales. And then this will be this. Remember, after adding the commission to the fixed salary, this was the answer, 4,550 kwacha. So now to find this, you can just take this one to the other side. Maybe you can call it x instead, and then you can say this times this will be 2x over 100, and then you can take the 3,200 to the other side, so that you have 4,550 minus 3,200. I think I'm kind of tired, but I believe this will be worth it. This is the longest video I've ever made. So you can subtract these two now. So you can say 4550 3200. That's a 0, that's a 5, that's a 2, a 3, and then that's a 1. So you have 1350. So now to solve for x, you can just cross multiply and say this times this, you have 2x, and this times this, you have 13, 5, and 3 zeros. And then to solve for x, just divide both sides by 2, so that your x will be 2 into 13, that's a 6, remainder 1, 2 into 15, that's a 7, remainder 1, 2 into 10, that's a 5, then you have 2 zeros there. So this is the amount of the total amount of sales this man made. And then on part B, we have a cylinder which has a radius of 14 centimeters and height 30 centimeters. Calculate the total surface area of this cylinder. So remember, if they don't state whether the cylinder is open or closed, you assume it is closed, because a cylinder is a solid thing. So to find the total surface area, you can say the curved surface area, which is given by 2 pi RH plus the area of this and the area of that, the area of the two circles. Remember, the area of the circle is given by pi r squared, and because it is closed, we have two of them. So we have 2, we've been taught to take pi as 22/7 multiplied by radius, which is 14, multiplied by height, which is 30, plus 2. We have a pi, which is 22/7 multiplied by the radius, which is 14, but because it's been squared, you can do this. So by the way, you can also use this simpler version of this. You still get the same correct answer. So now to simplify it, you can reduce your numbers by dividing by this denominator there. Then this times this would be 44 multiplied by this times that, that's a 60. Then this times this, we have another 44. 2 times 14, you have 28. And then we can multiply these two. So 0, 6 times 4, that's 24. Carry 2. That's another 24 plus 2, that would be 26. And then plus, we can multiply these from maybe this side. So this times this would be 32. This times this would also be 32 plus 3. That's 35. Then 2 times that, we have an 8. Another 8. That's a 2. That's a 3. Carry 1. And then this plus this, we have an 11 plus 1. That's a 12. So this will be 12, 3, 2, if I'm not mistaken. And then now we can add. So this plus this, we have a 2. This plus this, we have a 7. 2 plus 6, we have an 8. 1 plus 3, 1 plus 2, we have a 3. Of course, this is area, so you should have square centimeters. That was on part 7. And then we move on to part 7c. So the following arrow diagram is a mapping from set P to set Q. If X is a member of P and Y is a member of Q, write the formula for the mapping. So here it's just a matter of observing the pattern to see what is happening. Are they adding something? Are they multiplying by something? Are they dividing by something? Let's find out. So from 0 to 3, obviously the only way you can get a 3 is when you're adding a 3 to a 0. So let's try to add a 3 to this. So 3 plus negative 2. Okay, it's working. It's working and it's working. So what they are doing here is they're simply adding a 3. So you can say, since this is your X and this is your Y, remember X is from P. So this means X plus 3 is equal to Y. Whatever you have here plus 3, you get whatever you have here. But of course, we normally write this as Y is equal to X plus 3. So you are free to use any method of your choice here. We also have formulas which we can take advantage of to find the equations, but I think it's better this way. And then find the value of X when Y is a 5. So when Y is 5, so for X. So where there is Y, I can just put my minus 5. Then I have X plus 3. And then to solve for X, I can just take the 3 to the other side, so that I have a minus 3 is equal to X. And then this minus this will be minus 8. So my answer here is minus 8, which we can as well write as X is equal to minus 8, and you're done. And then the last problem, question 8. So given that L is equal to this and M is this, express 2m plus L as a single matrix. So you've got to be very careful here, because they said find 2m. So look for m. M is not always the first one. In this case, the first one is L. They've decided to start with this, followed by this. So you are replacing m with this, which is 1 minus 3 minus 2, 0, and then plus L, which is this, 5 minus 4, I think this should be a 6. Yeah, I think that's a 6. And then we have a 3 this side. And then now, before you do anything, you need to deal with multiplication here, a scalar multiplication. So according to BODMAS, before you add, you need to multiply. So you can say this times this will be a 2, this times this, we have minus 4, this times this, we have minus 6, then this by this, we have a 0. Remember, scalar multiplication requires you to multiply whatever you have outside by each of the numbers inside, and then you leave everything else as it is, like this. And then at this point, I can now add. Addition in matrices is easy. All you need to do is add the corresponding figures. So I'll add this to this, and then I'll add this to this, this to this, this to that. So you can say 2 plus 5, that's a 7. Then minus 4 plus minus 4, this will be minus 8. And then minus 6 plus 6, you have a 0. Then 0 plus 3, you have a 3. And this is your answer, and you're done. And then solve the equation. A minus 3 is equal to A plus 1 over 3. So to solve this equation, you can just put over 1 here and cross multiply. So you can say this multiplied by that, you have 3a minus 3, then 1 by that, you have a plus 1. So we can expand this so that we have 3a minus 9 is equal to a plus 1. Then to solve for a, you can put the like terms together. So we have 3a minus a is equal to 1 plus 9. This minus this, that's a 2a. This plus this, we have a 10. To solve for a, you can divide both sides by 2, so that your a is 5, and you're done. And then the last question, which was not printed out here, is this one here. So I'll use a plain paper because I need to use this paper for something else. So the table shows the frequency distribution of marks in a test. What is the model class? So remember, the model class is the most frequent class. So when you check your frequencies here, you can see that this is the biggest frequency. So you get the max, not the 6, the 7 to 9. So your answer here will be 7 to 9. And then calculate the mean mark. So the mean is the average. So you can just draw the table again. 1 2 3 4 5, 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so what you do here is you get the midpoints of these numbers here. By the midpoint, I mean the number halfway between 1 and 3. So when you look at 1 and 3, the number which is between these two is a 2. If you want, you can just add them and divide by 2, you get the same answer. And then the number between 4 and 6 is a 5. The number between 7 and 9 is an 8. The number between 10 and 12 is 11. The number between 13 and 15 is 14. So to find your mean, you can just multiply this by this, and then plus this by this by this, and then you divide everything by the number of numbers you have just added, which is the sum of the frequencies. So what I mean here is I have two threes, two, three of them. So instead of me writing them like this, which will consume a lot of my space, I can just say we have 3 2s. In other words, 2 3 times. And then instead of listing all my 5s, I can just say 5 by 4. Instead of listing all of my 6 8s, I can just say 8 by 6 plus 11 by 4 plus 14 by 3, and then everything divided by the total number of students. So because it wasn't stated, you can just add this. Remember, we had 3 students who got this, 4 students who got that, 6 who got 8, 4 who got 11, and 3 who got this. So in total, we have this plus this, which is a 7. Then 7 plus 6, we have 13. Then 13 plus 4, that's a 17. Plus 3, we have a 20. Like this. Then this times this will be a 6. That will be a 20. And then this will be 48, I think. Yes. And then this times this will be 44. Plus this times this, that's a 2. 3 plus 1, that's 42. Okay, 12 carry 1, yes, that's 42. Everything divided by 20. So now we can add the numbers in pairs. So I think it's much easier to add this to this and this to that. So this to this is a 50. Then this to this, that will be a 90, and then plus 20, this 20 over 20. Yeah, and then this plus this is 111 plus this, that's 160. So we have 160 over 20. And then we can just divide these two numbers, and our answer will be an 8, and you're done. Okay, so passing mathematics paper 2, as you can see, I was able to answer all the questions while explaining in 1 hour 22 minutes, and you write this paper in 2 hours. So if you can just pick the right questions, remember you're not answering everything, you're just picking any 6 questions. I mean, the first 2 questions have been picked, so from the remaining 6 you pick 4. So depending on the kinds of or the nature of questions you pick, you can even finish this paper in 30 minutes, 40 minutes, or 50 minutes. But of course, the extra time should be used to check your work. Verify your answers, prove your answers, try to solve them again so that you check if indeed what you did was correct, so that by the time you're handing the paper in, you have scored the best percentage you can ever get. Okay, we can end here.